hi everybody. Is this on? Are we good? I have to admit, who cheered out for the Cardinals? Okay, listen, I love the Cardinals. I worked for the Cardinals. They paid my salary for a while, but I'm all Grove Braves. Okay, I grew up in Atlanta, and so, but it was, but I love the Cardinals, and it was an amazing experience actually to be able to spend time there, and I just thought this is kind of surreal, if you love baseball, it was just fun, and I really had a good time with that. But nothing is better than what I've been able to spend the last 25 years doing, and that is being with PPA. I mean, working with professional photographers. I love everything about it. I love that it's small business. I mean, I love that it's small business, the smallest of small business, right? I love that it's entrepreneurism. That it's up to you, that you can be as successful as you choose to be. And I know some people here, deep inside, they may not say it out loud, but deep inside they're thinking, yeah, I'm not sure if I can be as successful as I choose to be. But you can. And I love that it's photography, because I say this on Capitol Hill all the time. Look, photographers, you are the keepers of our societal memory. Everything we think about in our lives, everything we think about in our world is created by you. Everything, on our walls, you don't have to walk any further than every office, every home in America to see what you guys do, the color, the passion, the love that you provide, because, we see our families there, right? Who else does that? We can go buy furniture, we can buy houses, we can buy cars, we can buy, whatever. We can do, we can be members at golf clubs. Not me. I'm nowhere near patient enough to be a golfer. And so, but we can go do those things, but that's not the stuff that matters. But what professional photographers do for us is huge. And sometimes I'm not sure photographers fully realize. I mean, they kind of say it to themselves. I'm not sure you fully realize. I have a really, really important question. It's one I should have asked yesterday, to be completely honest. Did you find your hotel room? Okay. Because I had so many people stop me and say, can you help me find my hotel room? After Sunday morning, they all stopped me and asked if I could help find their hotel room. Look, we've had some big conversations. So we did some research. This is now 2 years old and then 1 year old. So it's the same research 2 years in a row. And it was interesting when we conducted this research. This is what you guys said about yourself. 70%, they said they were bad at relationships. People don't like them. I'm afraid I can't sell my work. I don't understand my business. My photography isn't good. Everyone I know is much better. I will never make money. That was in preparation for a program that we were doing on negativity bias, which is not the kind of program that you'll hear, at other photography events. But you need to hear it. Why? Because you're not just photographers, you're entrepreneurs, you're small businesses, and you need to understand all of this stuff about yourself and in our world, what's going on. You need to know this. There is money to be made. There is nothing that indicates that photographers can't be wildly successful. There are no economic underpinnings that say this world is tipping on its end and photography is no longer going to be valuable. There is nothing. And if you say that to yourself, it's because you've created that dialogue in your head. But I put this up on the screen, and I had this sort of this reaction that came back at me that I wasn't expecting. When this came up on the screen, which is the reason I'm showing it to you now, there was this audible moan in the room. And it kind of broke my heart. And it caught me by surprise also. And I looked at a woman in the front row, and she had tears in her eyes. And it hit me so hard inside that this is what so many photographers, so many small businesses, this is the stuff that they believe about themselves. Where does all of this come from? Yes, exactly right. This comes from our head, and we're going to talk about some of this. But so it was really difficult for me to see the reaction in that room at that time. I almost felt guilty putting it up because I felt like I hurt everybody in the room, that they felt some of this. In fact, the number of people that feel this way in the photographic profession is very, very high. 2 years ago, 70%, felt that they were either not good enough as a photographer, not good enough as a salesperson, not good enough with people, didn't understand their business enough, and were overwhelmed by everything that they need to do as a small business, as a professional photographer. And I'm not asking you to raise your hands, but do you feel this way? At least some of this? Is this the stuff that goes through your mind? Yeah, some of you are raising your hands. I mean, yeah, and it's okay to admit that, because the truth is almost everybody goes through this. Everybody, and every small business goes through this, especially. And you guys are the smallest of small businesses. You don't have a lot of staff to fall back on. And if you do, the chances are they're looking to you for guidance. They're looking to you for strength, for the pep talk, right? They want you to give them the pep talk. But who's giving you that? And I'm not giving you a pep talk today. My point in today is to help you understand what's actually taking place in our world, the real stuff, and the things that are going to be most meaningful to you. So when we saw this, we decided we wanted to do something. By the way, this wasn't just new photographers. The majority of this, almost all of it, were established, long-time photographers. People that had been in the industry for years and years and years. So it's not a bunch of new kids saying, oh yeah, I'm not even sure where to begin. I need your help. These were longtime photographers who were just being very honest and saying, yeah, I've been doing it for decades, but I just don't know. So we sat around and discussed what happened in that room. That was a program on negativity bias, and we're going to talk some about negativity bias. And we said, what would be the most help? And look, in the past I've done 90-minute programs on branding and marketing and actually understanding branding. A lot more people think they understand branding than actually understand what branding is. And so I've done 90-minute programs on branding and marketing, or just on finances, on understanding where your money is and what's going, or understanding the economy, or on negativity bias, or on creating an actionable vision, which is just so critical. An actionable vision for your business, because I promise you, if you don't have something written down right now, you cannot hit a target that doesn't exist. And so you have to have something. But it can't just be, yeah, I want this many more schools, or I want to make this much more money. It's got to be much more than that. So we talked about all of those things, and our directors of education, said, well, here's what I think we need to do, as we discussed it. Need you to do a program with all of those. And I said, no, that sounds kind of, I told my wife, Sandy, sitting here, I said, that seems kind of cheap. We're just going to, no, I think people need to understand that the issues exist and the basics in those issues, and they can get more information as time goes on, but we've got enough time. We need to address all four of those things. And I really kind of fought the idea some, because I'm a big believer in deep dives on a subject rather than skimming the surface. And then the response was, yeah, but you don't have to skim the surface. You can do a little more than that. But make sure that you outline these topics. And so we're going to do that. We're going to hustle here, but we're going to talk about really the four. And look, there are times where you get the eye candy and you get to have fun, you get to whoop about images, and you get to talk about the stuff you love, gear. We just bought new lighting, right? Pirate, we just got new lighting, and we're so excited it's going to arrive when you get home. You're going to have some new lights, and we love to talk about that stuff, and that is the fun. But sometimes we have to eat our vegetables. And I'm not saying we won't have any fun. I hope you do have some fun, but we're gonna eat healthy during, and it's not something I'm good at, but we're gonna eat healthy during this particular session, because I just feel like we need to discuss it. So we're gonna talk about the negativity bias that is inside all of us, and why that matters, and what you can do about it. By the way, there is a negativity bias inside all of us, and that branding is everything. Your brand is everything. Look, if I'm purchasing from you based on something other than your brand, then you are on a downhill slide. You're on a race to the bottom, because the default in everything but brand is price. And photographers cannot compete on price. It is a race to the bottom. It's a recipe It's a recipe for never taking a family vacation, or never having your house paid for, or never feeling comfortable. And, and so you can't compete on price. It has to be on brand. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then the fact that nothing works consistently without an actionable vision. And we'll talk about, I know that you're thinking actionable vision, but it's just something I started using a while back because I felt like it's more descriptive than what we teach so often, which is, you have to have goals and you have to have vision. Yeah, you do. It has to be an actionable vision. So we're going to talk about what that is. And then just an understanding that the economy is cyclical. Who's bummed out about the economy right now? Okay, you're allowed to raise your hand. I think everybody's, but it's okay. The economy is cyclical. It comes and goes. Good economy, bad economy. It doesn't. There's nothing for an entrepreneur that says bad economy, you can slow down and feel sorry for yourself. The economy's always going to fluctuate. It's always going to be up and it's going to be down. And just the fact that it's down right now doesn't mean it's not going to be huge next year. And so, we're gonna talk a little bit about that. That the economy is cyclical. The entrepreneurial mindset is not. Right? Your entrepreneurial toughness has to be there all the time. It's always there. You are who you are. You're focused. You're steely-eyed. You're ready to compete. You are an entrepreneur, a small business. And a photographer, but you are an entrepreneur. You're a small business, right? And you can fight through any tough economy, and that's not a pep talk, because I don't really like to do pep talks. So let's start with that as message number one. It's the economy is cyclical, an entrepreneurial mindset is not. And what I want to do is I think the best way to start with that is just a dose of reality. In all of this, okay? Because I know that you know most of this. You may know all of this, but I just want to remind everybody exactly where we are. First of all, American wages are at record high levels. That's reality. Wages are higher than they have ever been. People are getting paid more for their jobs than they ever have in the history of the world right now. So your customers have never had a higher income for the same job. And you're probably thinking, yeah, but inflation, Even with inflation taken into account, their purchasing power is almost exactly the same as it was. Per capita inflation-adjusted personal disposable income. That's actually a title heading in the U.S. Financial Census. It's that. It's called per capita inflation-adjusted personal disposable income. And it takes everything into account, wages and government payments, which are like Social Security and unemployment and that kind of thing, minus taxes, adjusted for inflation. Now, that's what that category is, okay? It's wages plus government payments minus taxes, adjusted for inflation. And you're probably sitting there thinking, what is the shortest way to the door? We're talking numbers. I promise, give me 10 minutes. Just give me 10 minutes on this, all right? Adjusted for inflation, because you need to know this. And in fact, you shouldn't need me to tell you this. You should have already gone to the U.S. Census Bureau's financial data, because it's right there for everyone to see. And it's objective. It's not affected by politics, and it's not affected by news media, and it's just numbers. And numbers are unfeeling. And we should be a little that way when we're talking about our numbers. Numbers are numbers. Business is business. And so we shouldn't let all of the extracurricular stuff and everything our friends are telling us and all of that, we shouldn't let that affect us. So adjusted for inflation, Americans have about the same purchasing power in their pockets as they did in 2021, when they were spending crazy. We set all kinds of records in 2021. I'm not sure everyone knows that or not. We almost doubled what we spent during the holidays. We almost doubled what we spent during everything. We spent an unbelievable amount of money. We have almost about the same purchasing power in our pockets as they did in 2021. Now, why do I bother to say that? Any thoughts on why I would bother to bring that up? Because that affects the entrepreneurial mindset. If you let that affect you, it gives me an excuse as an entrepreneur to say, well, it's just not going to be as good this year. That stops me from getting up in the morning and doing something that I should be doing for my business. It slows me down, right? You can't let that stuff affect you. You have to know what's actually going on in the economy. And first and foremost, that the economy is cyclical. But our mindset as entrepreneurs, it is not cyclical, right? So we can't be affected by this. We can't be, oh, this is a bummer. We can't. We may not be curling up in the fetal position, but we certainly take our foot off the gas a little bit because we think this is going to be a wasted year until this inflation's gone. It's just not true. That's not the way it works. The Fed raised rates 7 times in 2022. Did you hear that? Anybody hear that news? The Fed raised rates 7 times. We don't love it, but it's a good thing, guys. When they say the Fed raised rates, you should be saying, oh, thank heavens. Because the problem is inflation. And there is only one cure for inflation, and that's the Fed raising rates. That's just the way it works. So it's like going in for necessary surgery. We really, really don't want to do that. We don't want the downtime. We don't want the pain. We don't want the recovery, the rehabilitation. We don't want that, but we do it because we know that it's good for us. That's what's happening right now. So the Fed is raising rates, and that's a good thing. The Fed's probably going to raise rates another 75 points. In terms of the rate, 75 points means 0.75 of 1 percentage point, okay? So 75 points means they're going to raise 0.75 another percentage point. And listen, they'll probably do this. I know you know this. But they'll probably do this before summer. Why? Because the summer months are really important for the economy. So over the next few months, they're probably going to raise rates 2 or 3 more times, a half a percentage point, or maybe a quarter of a percentage point. They're probably going to do that 2 or 3 more times between now and summer because they want the economy kicking in the summertime. Hear that? Because you're a small business. You need to be planning for that. The economy is going to be kicking in more likely than not. More likely than not, the economy is going to be kicking in early summer. Why? Because everybody wants that to happen. Not just politicians. Everybody wants it to happen. The summer is really important for our economy. So that's what's going to happen. So they're still going to have to, by the way, just so you can see, it's been effective. It's working. So, right in here, we're looking at January 2020 and March in 2020, and we had, you guys might have heard or remember, there was this pandemic. And so it started affecting our economy, and people just stopped spending. They weren't sure what was going to happen and what it was going to do. And then there were supply shortages, right? You remember that? This is when they were beating each other up in the aisles of Costco over toilet paper, and so there were big fights, and you couldn't get meat, and you couldn't, you guys remember that, right? We're not fully out of that yet, by the way, but there are supply shortages. So those supply shortages then started, of course, forcing up price, and inflation started to grow on us, right? And then the government kind of figured out what it needed to do, and it created, and no political statements here, it created the, some measures to be able to put money back in people's pockets, and so the stimulus checks. So with the stimulus checks came, the start of pretty heavy inflation, and we all knew that, but that was okay. It was a fair trade-off, and it is. This is just like the economy is a game where you're just kind of, you're working on one side knowing you're going to have to go work on the other, and you're going to go bolster this side, then you go bolster the other side. So stimulus checks, of course, caused inflation. Again, no political statement. And the economy is not political. I mean, it is affected by politics, but in your mind as an entrepreneur, the economy is the economy. We just need to understand what's going on that. I promise we're not going to keep talking about numbers. And so they started raising as inflation went up, they started raising the rates. Now, you guys have all heard that we had record inflation. Is that correct? Everybody has heard that we had record inflation. We did not, in fact, have record inflation. For a minute, we hit a record level, but for the year, which is what they count inflation by, there wasn't a record inflation, but there was high inflation. I mean, it was high. Don't get me wrong. And so they started raising the rates in, I think that was March. It went down in April, but went back up in May, so they raised it again in May, and they raised the rates again in June, and they raised the rates again in July, and they raised the rates again in, let me go back to that, in November and December. in September, November, and December, there were rate increases in the Fed. And you can see what it's doing. So it went down as much last year as it went up last year, and it's going to continue to go down as the Fed continues to raise rates. Raise your hand if you were expecting to talk about this morning when you came into a photography class. And so, but it's important that you understand what is actually happening here. They're going to raise a little bit more, probably go up another 75 points before everything starts to go down. The U.S. unemployment rate right now is at one of its lowest points ever. It's at 3.5% and dropping. Do you remember what happened in 1982? Kind of everybody remembers what happened in 1982? Not really, right? You do remember. So we started 1982 with 2 recessions at the very beginning of the year. It started with 2 big recessions. Unemployment was at 6.1%, which is what we ended roughly last year with, right? And still going down. Unemployment was at 6.1%. So we started 1982. By the end of 1982, we were in the biggest area, the segment of growth in jobs and the economy in our history in the same year. So my point is there's never a time, and that's the whole discussion. There's never a time where we as entrepreneurs, where you as small businesses can moan about the economy. You don't have time to do that. There are going to be good cycles, there are going to be bad cycles, but as entrepreneurs, we never stop. We are not affected by those cycles. We know our numbers, we look at them objectively, and we continue with what we're doing and just make sure that we are doing right things all of the time, right? In all of this, okay? The economy is cyclical. The entrepreneurial mindset is not tough times never last, tough people do. Oh, and by the way, alternate message number 1, Facebook is not a source for market research. And quite honestly, neither is the news these days, because the news is going to give you their version of whatever it is to make you ticked off at the other political party, depending on which news you're watching. I'm not picking on any of them. I'm picking on all of them, actually, is what I'm saying, is that the news is not a reliable source of information. You can find reliable sources of information online. It takes a 10-second Google search, or you can just go immediately to the U.S. Census Bureau's financial data, which is just numbers. It is just what happened with no real commentary at all. And so you should be able to go there. So the main, politics will always cloud our decision-making process. So we just need to focus on that. All right, let's talk about message number 2. That wasn't so bad, right? That wasn't too bad. I mean, look, I love talking about the other stuff. I would talk all day about branding. But we have to pay attention to the numbers. We're business people, right? We have to know our numbers. And we have to know what's actually happening. And you know what? When our friends come over for dinner and they start talking about it, you don't have to correct them, but you should at least know, yeah, that's not true. You're getting that off of news network, whatever. And that's what you're hearing that from. So you need to stay in the middle when it comes to our numbers and when all of that is, what's going on there. All right. Number 2 is there's a negativity bias inside all of us. It's inside all of us. It's there as a protection system, I guess. But when it comes to entrepreneurism, negativity kills. Negativity is what stops us from getting up in the morning and going talking to that potential client or that school if you're trying to do more school sports and events, or getting those materials ready for the wedding show that is in 2 weeks that you end up missing because you never got the wedding materials. It's negativity bias that constantly says, you're not going to get it, you're not going to get it, you're not going to get it. And even though your intentions are really good, that negativity bias wins out. And that is inside all of us. This is an industry of entrepreneurs. And there is nothing worse for entrepreneurs than negativity. People who are successful, and we can define success later, but people who are successful in business, they're successful because they don't see something as a failure, and they overcome their negativity biases that are inside all of them. And so I know this sounds like the opening of a pep talk. I promise that this is not going to happen. We just want to talk about this because because honestly, this breaks my heart. I mean, this just hurts me to see this. And to see that this is actually real. I mean, people really see this about themselves. And chances are you see something in this that you feel about yourself, and maybe multiple things that you feel about yourself. I want you to make sure you understand that's normal. I mean, that's normal. Overcoming negativity bias is real and very, very doable, as long as you recognize what's going on in yourself. And so there are some things that we want to talk about. There are a lot of studies about of electrical impulses in our brain as they ask us certain questions or as topics are brought up. And so this is, what I'm talking to you about is not theory. There is a lot of science behind negativity bias now, okay? A lot of it. And this is what a lot of that science produces. It says that negative images produce a much stronger response than positive images do. Our behaviors, our attitudes tend to be shaped more powerfully by bad news, by bad experiences, and by bad information. Do you guys believe that? Yeah, absolutely. We're all that way, actually. As humans, we tend to remember traumatic experiences better than positive ones, recall insults better than praise. Agreed? Yeah, I mean, you can be praised 10 times today, but at the end of the day, it's the one that sends something negative about you. That's what you remember when you go back to your room, at the end of the day. We recall insults better than praise. We react more strongly to negative stimuli. We think about negative things much more frequently than positive things, and we respond more strongly to negative events than to equally positive ones. Is it because we're just really terrible negative people? No. I mean, there are reasons for it. It's interesting. Dr. Roy Baumeister, who's a clinical psychologist and a behavioral scientist and researcher, he said that our brains are pre-wired with negativity bias, all of us, that bad is stronger than good. Negative feelings are far more powerful than psychological triggers than positive ones, and that they can provoke actions and feelings with long-lasting effects if we let them continue on. Now, it's important as entrepreneurs that we sort of get this, that we understand. The truth is, this is not your fault. We all do it. All of us do this all of the time, actually. Our brains are wired this way for a reason. So let's imagine we're all sitting together on a beautiful hillside. Now, let's imagine we're sitting separately on a beautiful hillside. And this is your view. I mean, life's pretty good. This is nice. It's beautiful. We're happy. And then we look over, that's the view to the right, and then we look over, to the left. And then we say, yeah, but it's so beautiful to the right. I feel so good. I feel so happy. Is that how that works? When you have equal stimuli? And that's what researchers posit. They don't know why we're all wired this way, but the reality is when we were created or evolved or whatever your belief system is, when we were at the time of that negativity bias was placed inside of us as a protection mechanism, right? It's what stopped us. Yeah, this is a beautiful scene, but we don't want to get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger either. So we're more focused on the possibility that there may be a saber-toothed tiger over there. We don't really relax and enjoy this scene. There's a reason for it. And it's completely okay. It happens to all of us. So our heart is saying, look at all these wonderful things that are Kevin, look at all this wonderful stuff that's going on today. It's good, 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 good. But your brain is saying, yeah, I can't look at that right now. I'm busy, right? This is exactly what we do. This is such a good depiction of what we do. We focus on the bad stuff, even though there's so much good that's going around. And we do it probably because it was some sort of a self-protection mechanism that was built into it. Carl Jung said that our mindsets, our thoughts, our beliefs, our expectations are the lenses through which we perceive the world. And these lenses affect how we live and the choices we make every day. The most important question anyone can ask is, what myth am I living? As I studied negativity bias, I kind of started changing my life because I felt like I'm a pretty positive person. And and yet a lot of this stuff seeps in. Now, again, there will be a lot of people like the ones who aren't in this room right now that are thinking, this is about my camera, about my gear, about my photography. And it is, by the way, it is. About my skill set, about understanding light, about all of that. But as entrepreneurs, we have to understand this. Entrepreneurs are a different animal. You guys have to understand what's going on in the economy. You have to understand what's going on in your mind. It's hard for me to see these screens from the side, so I apologize for going back behind here. But Amy Morin said, your thoughts are a catalyst for self-perpetuating cycles. What you think directly influences how you feel and how you behave. So, think about this. If you think you're a failure, you'll feel like a failure, then you'll act like a failure, which reinforces your belief that you must be a failure. And when I say failure, if I think I'm bad at sales, if I think I'm not good at lighting, if I think I'm bad at talking to my clients or whatever, then it starts becoming a self-perpetuating thing. And not to be too trite or trivial, but I do love Henry Ford and the way he thought. I wish I had the opportunity to sit down and meet him and interview him as a business person. But he said, he was the one that with this quote, famous, we all know it, but whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And I do believe that. Because our negativity bias is what stops us from getting up and trying before we ever get started. The dialogue that's constantly in our head stops us before we get started. PhD Gary Klein, who's a behavioral scientist, and he designed the Situation Room, the White House Situation Room. They're in the Situation Room. He's the guy that, the way that this would be most effective and all of that. He said that mindsets aren't just beliefs. It's not just beliefs. They are beliefs that orient our reactions and our tendencies. When our mindsets become habitual, they define who we are and who we can become. The part that bothers me about that whole quote is that they define who we can become. In other words, we can't even become who we want to be if we don't get this stuff out of our minds, if we don't get those false narratives that are running around inside of our heads out of our minds. So if we don't eliminate this stuff, it actually ends up affecting who we can become. I mean, it has a hard, real effect. If we don't get the negativity stuff out. This is not just look in the mirror and say, golly, you're swell, David, and people like you. And, it's not that stuff. This is understanding what's going on in my head. And I can tell you, there's one thing when it comes, we'll talk about rumination here in a moment. But there was one thing that actually has changed my life in a pretty big way from a couple of years ago. In fact, choosing to rewire is that we can rewire. And choosing to rewire is the most important thing, the most significant difference between people who live truly successful lives and those who just want to. All right. Do any of you, after anything, discussion with your spouse, one of your kids' teachers, a boss, an employer, a potential client, a negotiation with her, do you ever think, oh, I said that wrong, I did that wrong, or just ruminate about it? Okay. Do you sometimes take that into entire storylines? Because most of the population does this. We take a discussion that didn't even really happen, and it becomes an entire dialogue storyline in our life. Like, I could have said this, and I should have done this, and then they would have said that, and then this could have happened, and that. Like these entire stories that don't happen. Statistically, almost all of us do that. It's called rumination. It's just constantly second-guessing yourself and wishing you hadn't and spending your time on that. And rumination is one of the things that is most destructive when it comes to negativity bias, and one of the things that we can eliminate. Now, when I was going through all of this and basically learned the cure for ruminating, I thought, no, that's not going to make a difference. But it does. And here's what it is. Sandy and I, we've talked about this, a lot over the last year and a half or so. That when you start to ruminate, and we all do, when you start to ruminate, the cure is, David, stop, you're ruminating. Now, you can't just do it once. I mean, that's not the cure. But, but because you stop. Then you stop yourself. David, ruminating, stop. And when you do that on a regular basis, when you commit to doing that on a regular basis, the distance, the time between ruminating sessions, which, by the way, are not sessions, they're just, I'm driving home, I'm going to get something to eat after just having a conversation with, one of my coworkers, or it can be anything, and I'll start ruminating on how I should have done this, or how I could have done that, or that I'm not good enough, or yeah, I've got that presentation coming up, but I just, I'm not, it's going to fall flat. I don't know if I should be doing this or whatever. David, stop. You're ruminating. And as you do that, it's odd. It is strange. I admit it. And I almost didn't believe it when I first, because they all were saying the same thing. You have to just stop the dialogue. You just have to stop the dialogue. And when you stop the dialogue, then the space between those two dialogues starts becoming wider and wider and wider, to eventually it's maybe just, it's once a day, or maybe, and you'll say, David, stop, you're ruminating, and then maybe it's less than that, and the difference is remarkable. I know that it sounds almost too simple to want to employ, but if you just say, don't say, David, stop, unless your name's David, but if you just say, David, stop, you're ruminating. When you just practice that, it will make such a huge difference in your life. Rumination is one of the main things that reinforces our negativity bias. Okay, it helps us establish new patterns. You just tell our brain to stop and redirect, and that's what psychiatrists and psychologists both, that's what they say, is that you have to redirect your brain. Otherwise, it's going to keep going down that same path. Dr. Lisa Firestone said that every one of us, not most of us, every one of us, super successful people that always struggle with, depression, negativity, and everything, that every one of us possesses this voice in one form or another. Perhaps yours is more focused on your career. Don't go after that promotion. Just accept where you are. You're not capable of success. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that we all deal with. And then she says, we become our own worst enemy. It's an internal dialogue that drives rumination, self-blame, and self-loathing. It mocks us, shames us, scares us, lures us into self-limiting or self-destructive behavior. It influences us to not reach a goal. It's serious business. As entrepreneurs, we have to, it's the reason that PPA is saying, well, I know it's odd, but let's talk about negativity bias. Let's talk about rumination. Yeah, it's a photography conference. It's a photography conference for entrepreneurs, for small businesses. Let's talk about negativity bias so that we can sort of deal with all of this. When we are consistently hearing and repeating stories about ourselves, the narrative is reinforced, even if we are only hearing it in our own thoughts. So cognitive diffusion is different than the stop ruminating thing. Cognitive diffusion is about stepping back and it's kind of the same, but it's about stepping back and recognizing that thoughts are just thoughts, by the way, and that's a little bit tough of a concept, but thoughts are just thoughts. Stepping back from our own negative thoughts, because they are just thoughts. Going to Melly O'Brien, another co-founder of mindfulness, but also a behavioral psychologist, said that the thoughts in our head are simply that, just thoughts, not reality. When we are not fused with our thoughts, we don't take them so seriously. We hold them lightly. We certainly don't take our thoughts to be the truth, and we don't automatically obey them and play them out. So our thoughts are just thoughts. And so cognitive diffusion is about, sorry, I see somebody taking pictures on that if you want that. Cognitive diffusion is about just simply separating ourselves from our thoughts. Thoughts are not reality. Thoughts are just thoughts, okay? And so we don't let them become a reality that kind of just goes around and around in my head. And I can see faces in this audience right now that are And I'm not outing you in any way, but there are a bunch that are like, yeah, man, I do this all the time. This is me. I mean, but the truth is, this is all of us. Because we were all born with that fear of saber-toothed tigers. And so this is all of us. So message number 2 is realize, accept, understand that there is a negativity bias in all of us. That's thought number 2. Message number 2. Because once you realize it's there, you can do something about it. But when you don't acknowledge that it's there, you can't do anything about it. So cognitive diffusion and stopping ourselves from ruminating are the ways for us to overcome negativity bias. By the way, there is so much research out there on negativity bias. It's worth just reading a couple articles here and there, and it is worth it. Because negativity, when you're an entrepreneur, negativity kills. It stops us in our tracks. It stops us from getting up in the morning. It stops us from creating an actionable vision. It stops us from being creative. It stops us from believing in ourselves and doing something. The difference between all right, let's use photography as an example. The difference between a truly successful photographer, and we'll define success later, but a truly successful photographer whose skills are good, but I know better, and a much less successful photographer whose skills are amazing, but they always have a hard time making ends meet, is their belief in themselves, their understanding of what's going on in their head, their ability to get themselves out of bed and do something meaningful to build their business. All right, let's talk message number 3. How we doing? We good? Good. Message number 3. Your brand is everything. Now we're back on fun stuff. Well, I don't know. Maybe you don't think this is funny. I like the branding. I love branding. Your brand is everything. It is who you are. It's how you look when you get out of your car in the morning. It's how you speak to people. It's what you're wearing. It's whether you're wearing too much cologne, or too little cologne. It's your photography. But your photography alone is not your brand. Your brand is everything. It's all wound into one big stew. It's all mixed together into one giant stew. Your brand is how people feel about you. It's not your photography. It's how they feel about you. You are your brand. I don't want to upset anyone. As a non-photographer, but I've hung out with a lot of photographers. I have a couple of photographer friends. As a non-photographer, I can tell you the majority of your clients, they can't differentiate between amazing photography, unbelievably amazing photography, and amazing photography. They usually spot the bad photography, right? But when you're talking about high levels of photography, I'm lost. And I've spent a lot of time around photographers. And here's my point. If I have to start choosing between amazing photographer, unbelievable photographer that I just see as amazing because I can't differentiate it, and amazing photographer, they're all amazing photographers. What's my next step? Price. Now I'm competing on price. You're competing on price. What's the difference? It's amazing. What's the difference? Well, all right, let's find out which one's going to be better. The less expensive. So it's always your brand. Your brand is where you have to compete. You can't let it default into price. It has to be you. Did you want to ask a question?
So real quick on your brand, you mentioned the brand and then the price. What about you? They like you.
Yeah, you are your brand. That's exactly right. The price doesn't become as important. You know what? So he says, thank you. Your brand is you, they like you, your price doesn't become as important. That's exactly what I'm saying, by the way. Not only that, but your price actually creeps up because I want to do business with you. because I've done business with you before. And we'll talk about that. So there's an interesting, and I think that this is something that we all have to recognize always. We do this with PPA members, right? And that this is not about us. It's not about PPA. It's not about our services. It's not, but we're so amazing. Imaging US is so great. This isn't, if we are successful in any way, it's because we focus and we made a decision years and years and years ago that we weren't going to sell product and just produce great events and a great magazine. That if we focus on our customers, all of our other problems go away. So our brand is about our customer. It's not about us. It's not about PPA. Yeah, we are really proud of Imaging USA. We are really proud of the keynotes. We're really proud of Professional Photographer Magazine, which wins awards after awards after awards after awards after years. It's 115 years old this year, the oldest photography magazine in the world. And we're really proud of it. But that magazine has to be focused on our customers for it to be successful. Customers don't care about us. They don't care about, it's not their job to care about us. You know what they care about? They care about their kids, and they care about their carpool they have to drive tomorrow, and they care about the tires they have to replace that's going to cost them $1,200 or whatever, and they care about their ailing parents. They care about, Johnny just fell out of a tree last week, and baseball's coming up and he broke his leg. Is it going to be? They care about their own lives. They don't care about us, right? So our focus has to be completely about them. And I don't say that in a mean way that they don't care about us. I think it's important to just recognize that their concern is their life. And it's our job to be focused on theirs, not on ours. So there's this, I love this story. Some of you may have heard me even mention this story. So back in the late 1960s, there was a phenomenon going on. It was post-World War II. And we didn't know what it was at the time, but we knew that it was having an effect, that, people were coming back from the war. There was a lot of trauma, out of World War II. And for the first time in American history, the divorce rates started to climb. In fact, they started to skyrocket just about 10 or 12 or 15 years after World War II. So divorce rates started to really skyrocket. And so what happened during that period of time was that when they were divorced, kids were now being left at home because mom had to go to work. How do moms feel about that? What do you think? Did someone say something? Yeah, so how do moms feel like going back to work or going to work? Horrible, because everything they had learned about themselves was they judged themselves based on whether or not they were a good mother and a good wife. So now their self-esteem has done that, right? Because the entire world told them that that's who they were, a mother and a wife, and now you're neither. I mean, you're still a mother, but now you have to go out of the home and get a job. So moms were going out into the workforce to get a job. How were they feeling about that? Say, you said it. Guilty, really, really guilty. So mothers are just, they're under siege from all fronts. And so they feel very, very guilty about this prospect of now going out into the work world. In fact, there was a whole, and you know the word. We haven't used it for years and years and years. This is left over from the late 60s and up to the mid 70s or so. But their kids, we gave them a moniker. They were called latchkey kids, right? So latchkey kids, it was a big thing in the news. I mean, you heard it on the news. I was a latchkey kid, by the way. And but I remember news stories, about latchkey kids, right? It was a big deal. And every time the word latchkey kid was said, and it was said nonstop, moms were a little more. Okay, so flip the page. While all this is going on, there were 3 primary brands of peanut butter. They're the same 3 primary brands of mainstream peanut butter that we had today. They were, Peter Pan, Skippy, and Jif. Peter Pan, Skippy, and Jif. Basically the same ones we have today. Interesting, right? There are now premium peanut butters. So 3 main brands of peanut butter back then. And Jif was number 3, and had always been number 3, actually. Jif was tailing behind everybody else. And so Skippy, I don't remember which one was which, to be completely honest. Maybe one of you guys will be able to tell me. But one of them had 2 cups of peanuts in every jar, Skippy or Peter Pan, and the other one had more peanutty taste. You guys remember these? You remember these ads, right? One was more peanutty taste, and one was 2 cups of peanuts in every jar. So it made sense that if you sold peanut butter, you talked about peanuts. It makes sense. It just makes sense, right? We're selling peanut butter. It's got to be about the quality of our peanuts or how many peanuts, or right? It just makes sense. So Jif is having a big marketing meeting. I've actually talked to someone that was in this meeting. Jif is having a big marketing meeting, and they're saying, guys, we're getting our clocks cleaned. You know, what are we going to do? We have to fix this. You know, we're getting whipped here, and you know how marketing. You guys all watch Mad Men, but they started talking about how to fix it, and someone said, I mean, I don't know if these exact words. Someone said, well, we could put 3 cups of peanuts in our jars. You know what I mean? Or even more peanut buttery taste than anyone else. I mean, they started just doing the same stuff over and over, the same kind. Well, we could drop the price of our peanut butter, because Jif was a few pennies higher, by the way, and it still is. And they coming up with all these different things. And so finally, someone in the back of the room, this is what someone who was actually in the meeting told me. And this is a marketing thing that you learn through, and if you go through marketing in school, you know this story. But someone in the back of the room said, well, I mean, I don't mean to rock the boat too much here, but moms feel really awful about themselves right now. So why don't we just say, choosy mothers choose Jif? What? That doesn't say anything about peanut butter. It doesn't say anything about peanuts. That doesn't have anything to do with peanut butter at all. Yeah, but it has everything to do with the customer. It's not about us. It's about them. It's not about our life, our sales objectives. It's about their life, right? So moms who really needed a shot in the arm and could now send their kids to school with a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but it was Jif peanut butter, because choosy mothers choose Jif. They could send their kid to school with a Jif peanut butter sandwich, and they could feel a little better about themselves as a mom because of what society was trying to say to them. Jif, within 2 months, went to the #1 brand of peanut butter in America, and get this, because I don't know this exists in almost anything else, and has never not been #1 since then. And they still use Choosy Mothers Choose Jif. When you go on, you can look at Choosy Mothers recipes when you go to the Jif website. Choosy Mothers Choose Jif. It didn't even talk about peanut butter. It wasn't about peanut butter. You know why? Because nobody cares. They care about their life. It's their life. So when you're talking to yourself, you need to sell them on how good you need to be a good photographer. We want you to be a great photographer. We want you to be a master. We want you to be a certified professional photographer. We want you to be a skilled photographer. But your brand is about how you treat the other person, your customer, and all of that. Our customers are concerned with their lives, not with our lives. And that was the story there when they said choosing mothers choose Jif. Brand is about how they feel about you. And by the way, welcome to the experiential economy, because don't pretend that stuff doesn't matter. I don't think any of you do pretend that. But this is an experiential economy. It's how people feel about you at the end of all of it. It's their experience with you. Our research, and we've done a lot of research in recent years on this very subject, the #1 reason you can be upset with it, I don't think you will, but if you are, please understand, this is what they're saying. The #1 reason they are choosing you as a photographer is the ease in working with you. It's just the way it is. And it's not that close. It's like 82%. The #1 reason they're choosing you as a photographer is the ease in working with you, meaning the way you interact with them, the way you prepare them, the way you say, we're going to work this out for you, the way you deliver your product, the way you are on the shoot. And they're talking to all their friends about that, right? And the number one reason they're choosing you is because is ease of doing business with you, of working with you as a photographer. They care about you. They want the experience of being, you are the brand. They want the experience of working with you. That's what they want. That's what consumers want. We know that. Everything's about experience. I mean, we'll pay more to get a little bit better and for the opportunity to return, those shoes or that jacket, right? Well, we have no problem with that. Americans will pay anything for anything at this point. It's not about price. It's about working with you. So what is your process like? How approachable are we? How engaging are we? How quick are we to deliver? And I don't mean you have to deliver your product. You don't have to deliver your product, in a week or anything. I'm saying, but do we communicate with them about delivery? Do we send them extra notes? Do we? And I saw. You guys see Simon Bailey on Sunday? Okay, so I loved something that he had said, and that is, and that is, it's all the little things that are not part of the sale. In other words, if you're amazing and you send really nice little handwritten notes, and then at the end of the note it says, oh, by the way, we've got holiday photos staying next week, and it's 30% off if you do it in the first. You just blew it. They want actual, authentic engagement. People want authentic engagement, actual engagement away from the sale, right? So you show up at their kids' Little League. Here's the thing. You call up and you say, and we select you, as a photographer. And you say, great. So when would work? Well, let's see. We've got our calendar right here. What about this date? What about that day? What about that date? And you say, that'll be great. What about Friday? And we say, oh, we could do it Friday, but actually our daughter Caitlin, she's trying out for her big play. She's a drama, person, and sings, and so her rehearsal is that day, or her tryouts are that day, or whatever. Okay, well, so not Friday. So what about the following Monday? That'll work. Can we do it a little bit later because Jared's first baseball game is that afternoon? Or maybe could we just do it Wednesday because we don't have a game at all to worry about? Yeah, it's Wednesday. Now, we just told you stuff about ourselves, right? Are you going to remember it? Well, you're going to remember it for that long, but you've got a million things hitting you. The point is that you should have a file on the trusts. And you're saying, Caitlin's in place, she's trying out for it, and this is giving you reasons to interact with us away from the sale. Now, why is that important? Because you become not the photographer we just paid what we think is a pretty decent amount of money to do a job. That's transactional, right? That's just, we're paying you good money, we expect pretty good images here. I mean, these are our kids, they're the prettiest kids in the world, and so these better be great images. So you have to, now we have to get away from that, the transaction. That's just price, right, at that point. And you're moving into becoming our family photographer. And the difference in family photographer is this. Oh, we love that image. When someone comes over to your house, we love that image. Yeah, that was really good. We were up at Blue Ridge for that picture. That's the first scenario. The second scenario is, oh yeah, that's fantastic. That's Chelsea. She's our family photographer. She's amazing. You know what? She wrote a note that said, hey, tell Jared good luck. A handwritten note that said, tell Jared good luck with his baseball tries. I'm going to try to swing by one of his games, And then if you ever did swing by for 3 minutes, one of the games on the way to something, oh man, you will not be able to afford that kind of advertising. I mean, there will be so much. That is experience, right? We are in an experience, like it or not, we are in an experiential economy, which means you have to find ways to interact with your clients and potential clients away from the sale. Because when it's about the sale, it's just the transaction. And look, we all expect that. There is a transaction moment with every purchase, right? There's the transaction. But you have to communicate away from the sale. So this is an experiential economy. Your brand has got to be the experience, not just the amazing photography that you produce, which I know it's amazing, but it has to be away from it. It's interesting. Sadie and I ride, and I was talking to a Harley Davidson vice president of marketing. This is like very high up in Harley right now, and talking to a Harley Davidson vice president of marketing one time. And he told me this. He actually said this. He said, David, people who don't know what else to talk about great quality and customer service. And when you look at that, you think, huh? What else is there? There is the experience. Harleys aren't the best ride, by the way. Anybody ride? Not picking on your Harley. But Harleys aren't the best ride. They're just the coolest ride. They're the loudest ride. and they're the ones most likely to be in the shop. But nobody cares because it's a Harley. It's the image. It's how you feel. It's how you feel about yourself when you're on that bike, right? It's how we feel about ourselves when we. And so that's the economy. And Harley got that because they were almost out of business in the 80s, and because they started trying to copy what Japanese bikes did, which is to build really good, efficient bikes that were quieter and smoother and handled better. And they said, this isn't who we are. And they ended up going back to who they were, and Harley became Harley, the number one, the most desired brand of motorcycle in the world, actually. But I thought that was amazing. That people who don't know what else to talk about great quality and customer service. He's not saying those things aren't important. You have to have great quality. And customer service is transactional. You put in the credit card, you do whatever, you pay it, it delivers when it's supposed to deliver. But that's not the experience. That's transactional, the customer service part of it. This is important. Brand determines value. Do you ever go to the airport and look in the water cooler and look in, at the store? And there's a brand of water, $1.99, $1.99, $2.49, $3.29, and it's water. 2/3 of the planet is covered with this stuff. This is not in short supply. This is water, right? Why would you pay $3.29? Well, you're convinced. First of all, we love what it says about us when we're holding that brand, and let's not pretend that doesn't matter, because it does. We like the way the bottle is shaped. We think it's nicely done, and we think it says something about us in terms of their philosophy and their environmental aspects of their company and that kind of thing. So it does matter. All of that stuff does matter. In the end, it's water, and there's very little difference. This is Aquafina. By the way, Aquafina, the number 2 brand, Dasani's the number 1 brand of water in the world. Aquafina, number 2, neither one of them were the early arrivers in the market. They both were late arrivers, but they are the number 1 and number 2 brand. Dasani is bottled by Coca-Cola. Aquafina is bottled by. And what are the 2 strongest brands of anything in the world today, including Apple and everyone else? What are the 2 strongest brands? Coke and Pepsi, 2 strongest brands in terms of brand recognition and brand strength of anything in the world. So, foundations for understanding branding is that customers are emotional, not rational, okay? It's never about the product. It's always about the customer. You don't get to choose your brand, but there are things you can do to build it. So it's your job to build your brand. It is assigned to you by your consumer, by your customer. Your brand is assigned to you. The things that you do is you build interactions away from the actual sale. Be engaging. It matters what you're wearing. It matters what you look at. It matters whether your car looks like you've just been mud bogging when you pull into their parking lot. It matters. That stuff matters. It's all about how they feel about you, which is a scary proposition, I admit, but and there are ways to build it, which are those transactions away. By the way, just super fast, Haagen-Dazs. We love Haagen-Dazs. We love, the idea that it is, a Scandinavian ice cream company, and that, it makes us feel good and it's tasty and all of that, right? So Haagen-Dazs was actually invented by a kid in New Jersey in 1961 who had no Scandinavian roots whatsoever. He just came up with the name, pulled it out of nowhere. He added the umlaut later because he thought it sounded tastier. Haagen-Dazs is not a name, it's not a word, it's not an anything, it's just a made-up moniker that he decided to put on his ice cream, and it's worked really well for him. He's selling ice cream. There are others who sell ice cream out there. Now look, Haagen-Dazs is good, right? So Haagen-Dazs is good ice cream. I think you have to be good, just like in photography. It has to be good ice cream. It can't just be bad ice cream. But he actually initially released his ice cream under another brand, and some of you in the Northeast might recognize it. It never really took off. It was called Cirro, C-I-R-R-O or something like that. And then he reintroduced it as Haagen-Dazs, and it took off. Branding doesn't matter? Of course it does. And so it's just how we feel about that ice cream. We just assume that that is going to be really good. So your brand is everything. It's not the price of your work unless you give them nothing else. If your customers have nothing else to judge you by, to feel by, then it defaults to price, and then you're on a race to the bottom. And so we have to give them something, and that something is you. Now that's good, because you guys are all amazing, and you all have amazing things about you. So the idea that you give them that you are the product. Don't pull out your price sheet or your products. Don't start when you ask what they're looking for, don't divert the conversation. Start talking about, your stuff. Listen to them and see what they actually want, and then deliver that. If you're not willing to do that, then it will be a tougher road to continue to build your brand. So message number 3 is your brand is everything. All right, message number 4. Nothing works without an action. I feel like I need to take a breath. Nothing works without an action. I apologize if we're going so fast, but we did want to cover 4 things. Nothing works without an actionable vision. So here's what I mean. You guys, have you searched, if you had your phone, you don't need to do this, but you started searching for goals that are, right about now it's going to start popping up something. Now it's really going to start popping up a bunch of stuff. Goals that are not written down, right? Now, you guys have all heard this. A goal that is not written down it's just a wish. Exactly right. Goals that aren't, and when you do that, this is what pops up. That's what pops up. And that, and that, and that, and that, and that. This one kind of makes me chuckle. Quotes.com, unknown. Well, is it a quote if it's unknown? Not to mention the fact that every one of the others actually had the guy's name. I mean, when you look at it, there is a name to it, okay? His name is Fitzhugh Dodson. And just for the record, he was a Presbyterian minister, lifelong educator, psychologist, an author, and chief consultant on the California Head Start program. That's who actually came up with, or first said, goals that are not written down are just wishes. By the way, and I agree with this completely. You guys agree with this? I think we all agree with this, but I think it stops short. Nothing against Dr. Dodson. I mean, but I think that this stops well short of being effective and actually being meaningful. Although I do think that is correct, because in my mind, it has to go further. Goals or vision, to be meaningful, must be actionable. They have to be written down, and they have to be actionable. In other words, I'm going to pick a goal. I'm going to grow 3 inches. No, that's not going to work. I'm going to increase my sales by $100,000 this year. Good goal? Yeah, absolutely. If you're an athlete, I want to increase my endurance. I want to decrease my time. I want to increase my strength. Good goals? Great. And those are all solid goals. So I'm not saying that those aren't great goals. They're all good goals. But if they're not actionable, that is to say, if you don't stop yourself and say, okay, great goal, how are we going to do that? And then you have to have a sub-goal. So that goal now you have tactics or sub-goals, that you are also writing down that start to become a little bit actionable. Well, I'm going to increase my sales by this. I'm going to do this many, and I want to do 3 more weddings this year than I did last year. I know I'm just making stuff up. And so I want to do 3 more weddings than I did last year, and that's how I'm going to do it. Okay, good, great. It's all written down, perfect. How? How what? How are you going to do the weddings, the additional weddings? Well, I'm going to go, there's a trade show that I haven't been going to. I'm going to go there to some bridal shows. I'm going to do this. I'm going to go do that. And what about your schools? Well, I'm going to make myself get out of bed. Good part of the whole actionable vision thing. No, it is. I mean, that's make myself get out of bed. I'm going to go talk to these, whatever, the superintendent, and start building a relationship. I'm just going to stop by and build. I know they're not going to give me a contract tomorrow. I'm going to stop by and start building that relationship. Great. How? In other words, what are you going to take to that person? There are materials you've got to develop to take there, right? I mean, there's something you have to do. There's something that you have to have. You can't go in there empty-handed. What are you? What is your plan for making that presentation? So the point is that your actionable vision should include, first of all parts of your life. It can't just be about your photography. So success, and you have to answer this for yourself. Success equals what? Money. I'm not saying I'm saying these are the things you have to consider. Family, career, health, spiritual aspects of your life, educational, all of those different things. What do you call that, by the way? What do you call that list? Values, life goals. You know what I call that? Balance. If you don't have goals for the key, I'm not saying that list. You might have other things. You might have me on there. You might have quiet time on there. Quiet time is important, right? The point is that if you don't plan for it, write it down, and then explain with sub-goals, sub-items, how you're going to achieve that, it's not happening because life happens every day. And that stuff won't happen if you don't have those things. So you have your goal. A goal not written down is just a wish, but a goal written down is still basically a wish unless you have some tactical support, some tactical ideas or sub-goals, and then you have sub-goals supporting those. So I'm going to have this material worked on. I'm going to carve out this afternoon and that evening and that afternoon to prepare that material. It's going to be at the printer on this day. It's going to be back. I'm going to rehearse the presentation in my mind on this time, and I'm making the presentation, and then I'm going to call and get the interview, the appointment, and then I'm going to make the presentation. There are like 7 things that have to happen before you get up and go do that. And if you don't have those 7 things on your calendar, what's going to happen? So what kind of change is there in your business? This stuff has to happen, right? You have to have it down there. So yes, a goal not written down is a wish, but a goal written down is still just a wish unless you have actionable things in these different categories. To me, when you look at success is about living happily. What does it take for you to live happily? And I think it takes balance. You have to decide what those categories are. I'm not giving you any categories or any goals. I'm just saying you have to decide what those categories are that will help you to live happily. And I promise you it includes things like health and recreation and time with your significant other, or time to go find a significant other, or whatever it is, right? And so you need that in your life, and you've got to have that as part of your goal. It has to be written down. So I'm skipping back through this. I do have me on that list. So this is how that works. You have your vision, your goals, your success, your plan for happiness, and then you have secondary goals and then tertiary goals, that support those things, that are important so that you can actually make that happen. Pick one thing and work it to its beginnings. And on each one of those things, and this is maybe the most important part of this entire discussion, and then you have to add it to your calendar. An actionable vision for yourself is what gets you up in the morning. It's what lets you know I've got this and this and this and this and this. I live in a world where I've got, assistant, I've got meetings we have regular meetings, we have regular tasks, we have stuff. It's easier for me than it is for you. You guys have got to create all of that, create a calendar, and then be disciplined as an entrepreneur to get up and do those things. But if you don't have an actionable vision, most of it doesn't happen. And you know what happens? Next year, we'll be talking about the same thing. So nobody can, and I think that this is important. And so message number 4 is nothing actually happens with an actionable vision. And all of that kind of brings us to the final part of this. Yeah, it's true. Anybody ever see the Beverly Hillbillies? Okay. It's true that once in a while you might be shooting for a squirrel in your backyard and hit oil, but that's not actually a plan for success. Maybe somebody hits the jackpot. Maybe someone wins the lottery. That's not an actual plan for success. We are entrepreneurs. We're small businesses. And this is in our hands. And the harsh last reality, I think, is this. And this is a reality that nobody is going to drag us kicking and screaming into a successful, happy life. If we get there, it's because we stand up and get there on our own. Now, I am here to tell you that the economy is doing just fine. Yeah, we had some tough times, but like we said, you're going to have tough times. That's the economy. The status of the economy today cannot affect your entrepreneurial toughness, your entrepreneurial mindset. That has to be consistent, no matter what is going on in the world today. Oh, and by the way, I think we're mostly out of it. I mean, don't call me and be angry with me, but I think later, if it doesn't happen this way, but I think we're mostly out of it. I think they're going to raise rates again, and you're going to start seeing this spring, right now, and you're going to start seeing a pretty serious recovery starting in June. Why? Because that's when you want recovery to start. The economy is booming. You want people to have some money in their pocket. They're making more money than they've ever made in their life. Unemployment rate is drop dead low right now. We can't get enough workers. And once inflation goes down, by the way, when inflation goes down, they just have more money in their pocket to spend, right? They still are making those same wages. Their wages aren't going to go down with inflation. So wages have been bumped up. And then once it starts to drain and inflation goes back down, their wages are still here. And I think, honestly, that that's going to serve us in the next big boom, a big recovery in all of that. So I think there's great opportunity. And I think the photography industry is alive and well. I don't think there's ever been a time where people need great photography more than today. And don't tell me that you have to compete with this, because people are not putting it, I don't know anybody, there may be someone, people are not putting this stuff on their walls. Millennials, the largest generation in history now, they passed baby boomers a year and a half ago. Millennials are all graduated. They've got their college degrees. They're married. They're starting to have babies. For the first time, they have their own walls, their own homes, their own walls or apartments or whatever to hang pictures of their kids. And this is an entire generation that had photographs of themselves everywhere, on their buttons, at Little League games, they were everywhere. You think they're not going to put images of their kids on their walls? That's a reach too far, right? So photography is alive and well. There's nothing that indicates that this industry is not set to continue to grow with every other industry for years and years to come. Guys, thank you so much for your time. I really, really do appreciate it. I love this stuff. I know that we covered a lot. I know that this was a lot of vegetables, maybe, and not so much just fun. But the fact that you are here says, I think, a lot about you. and I'm looking forward to hearing the stories of success for many years to come. So we do have, sorry, we just kidding. We do have a Q&A taking place out there. I was told to remind you guys, if you want to do a Q&A, we'll be out there for a little while. So thanks very much. Enjoy the rest of your show. Party tonight. You got the closing night party tonight. So thanks, everybody.